Is there any evidence that there was other species of human beings that existed in the Americas?
Estos cuerpos no corresponden a un ser orgánico. De acuerdo a los científicos, y ustedes les podrán hacer las preguntas, estos cuerpos, como vemos aquí, tienen separación en las coyunturas muy extrañas, tienen una forma del cuerpo muy extraño como para ser considerados orgánicos. Nunca lo hicimos. Sin embargo, sí pensamos que son antiguos. De acuerdo a la persona que los encontró, fueron localizados en el mismo lugar.
Many groups and communities are convinced that there is more out there. And what began as a curiosity about the many species of humans populating the Earth turned into an investigation of how aliens might be among us.
And so the burden of proof has shifted to the Pentagon, to the military. Now they have to prove that these aren't extraterrestrial.
Attitudes towards UFOs changed as distrust in the government increased among the American people, which means, as Dr. Michio Kaku said, the burden of proof transferred from us onto entities like the Pentagon and the military. Primarily because if there's anyone who can explain it, it's them. Whatever flying machines people may spot in the sky, they report it for one simple reason. They do not adhere to any known laws of physics. There is an obvious lack of a propulsion method. There is no heat signature that would be expected of an object that is going at a tremendous rate of speed. And they create no sonic booms, which is an inevitable result of an object exceeding the sound barrier.
When you exceed the sound barrier, you create a gigantic boom that is then shatters windows and can be heard miles around. These objects can effortlessly break the sound barrier and not create a sonic boom. And they don't create any exhaust. We don't see any exhaust trail from these objects.
So, what is the explanation?
So the Chinese, the Russians, and the Americans are all working on these things, but you can see how primitive they are. We're talking about objects that defy the known laws of aerodynamics with a technology beyond what we have today. And so that's why people are scratching their heads. Whose are these things if they're not the Chinese, the Russians, or the United States?
Lex Friedman's podcast with Dr. Kaku explains the possible similarities humans may have with aliens.
When you think about entities that's out there, extraterrestrial, do you think they would naturally look something that even is recognizable to us as life? Or would they be radically different?
Well, how did we become intelligent? Basically, three things made us intelligent.
Those three things he is talking about are our eyesight, which has been designed similar to a predator's, front-facing to lock into our targets. Based on this information, we decide where to hide and how to ambush, not unlike a lion or any other predator chasing their prey. The second is opposable thumbs, be it in the form of a human hand or tentacles. Anything that allows the animal to manipulate their physical surroundings using hand-eye coordination. And the third is language. That means, in the animal kingdom, information is primarily learned through lessons, not passed down from generation to generation.
Because, Mama Bear never tells Baby Bear to avoid the human hunter. Bears just learn by themselves. They never hand out information from one generation to the next.
So how many animals on this planet possess all three? Even our closest relatives on the evolutionary tree, the apes, have a capacity to learn no more than 20 words, while the average human mind knows at least 10,000.
So when we meet aliens from outer space, chances are they will have been descended from predators of some sort. They'll have some way to manipulate the environment and communicate their knowledge to the next generation. That's it, folks.
So functionally, we would be able to recognize them.
Which begs the question, could they look exactly like us? Maybe that's why we're uncovering new species that have similar skeletal structures.
Confirmado. ¿Y esto qué es? No son artesanías. Estas son cabezas exactamente como se encontraron. Es de una de las dos especies. Estas son las manos tridáctilas que encontramos con, si ven ustedes, con implantes. Estos implantes deben de ser estudiados. Estos implantes, nadie ha hablado de ello.
There are, of course, opposing views. In the case of the Alien Mummies of Peru documentary, Live Science found that those three-fingered human-like structures were actually a combination of looting and manipulations of actual human body parts. Andrew Nelson, a professor of anthropology at the University of Western Ontario in Canada, said that the skeleton, quote, looks like a typical Nazca mummy in the flexed, seated position. The hands and feet noticed on this mummy and the other 4 discovered in the area were also likely parts of real human mummies that were manipulated by foragers, a white coating being added afterward to hide these manipulations. So, while it might be a bold claim to say aliens do not exist, it is safe to say that we have a lot more uncovering to do before we find them. Whatever remains and proof we find next of a life form resembling us, the best we can hope for is finding another of our cousins on the evolutionary tree to help us gain an understanding of our past. But, if we're lucky, it might turn out to be an extraterrestrial after all, giving us more insight into which species have visited our planet and left their mark on it.
Yeah, we're discovering new stuff about ourselves. We're discovering that our story is much richer, much more textured, much more layered than we thought it was. It's not a simple story. It's a very complicated story. And we ourselves are a hybrid species. We are the result of interactions with all kinds of different looking human beings. And the end result is ourselves.
Humans today are a rich tapestry of interwoven ancestries. And with every fossil we discover, our story gets a little bit more complex and more interesting. Modern humans are the culmination of a long, long history of migrations, separations, and reunions. Emphasis on migration and separation. It wouldn't be surprising if we found new species of humans tucked away in some corner of the world. We are, after all, cousins of the Neanderthal, Homo rudolfensis, and Homo erectus. So who is to say there aren't more? The fact is, we don't know. The stories we unearth could be our past, or they could be the past of a life form that looks like us, but isn't. As scientists look back further into our history and uncover evolutionary relationships, their findings further complicate the narrative of humans and the history of the planet. It so happens that one of our distant cousins was found in a Denisova cave in Siberia in 2008.
Then in Russia, in Denisova cave, they find a single pinky bone from a little finger. And they do the DNA testing on it. They're able to get a complete genome from it. And what they discover is this isn't a Neanderthal. This isn't an anatomically modern human being. This is another human species who they named the Denisovans. They think they're more closely related to Neanderthals than they are to anatomically modern humans.
The common ancestor that the Denisovans share with Neanderthals and us is the Homo heidelbergensis, who most likely lived in Africa. Around 300 to 400,000 years ago, one group of Homo heidelbergensis left Africa, and those who went to Europe evolved into Neanderthals, while the ones who took to Asia became Denisovans. The human ancestors that remained in Africa became Homo sapiens, and our species likely met the Denisovans for the first time in Eurasia about 40 to 60,000 years ago, when we began our own migration out of Africa. After extensive studies into the pinky bone found in that Siberian cave, scientists have noted a few things. First, that the bone belongs to a female of the species. Second, the species likely had dark skin, dark hair, and dark eyes. In fact, some computational biologists have taken the data rendered and produced a rough sketch of what they may have looked like. It seems they were similar in appearance to Neanderthals, but had some subtle differences, like a wider jaw and skull. Third, they showed a low genetic diversity, which means their population couldn't have been large. And fourth, it's highly likely modern human ancestors interbred with Denisovans, just as they did with Neanderthals, because Denisovan DNA has been found in the human genome.
It's another example of a missing chapter in the human story that is beginning to be pieced together. It's obvious now that we were not alone, that there were multiple other human species who were human enough to interbreed with us and leave DNA.
The largest population today with Denisovan DNA exists in Australia amongst the Australian Aboriginals. Some present-day East Asian groups, in particular the Melanesians, who are native to a region spanning from Papua New Guinea up to Fiji, may have inherited up to 5% of their genetic material from Denisovans. In addition, Tibetans and Han Chinese have traces of Denisovan DNA too, as a study in 2014 found out. It seems that ethnic Sherpas likely inherited the so-called super-athlete gene variant that helps them breathe easily at high altitudes. Graham Hancock, a British author and journalist with a reputation for his theories on ancient civilizations, took a trip to the cave himself when researching for his book that extensively discussed Denisovans. He shares on the Joe Rogan podcast how he found other interesting objects that gave a glimpse into the art created by this species of humans. One of them was a green stone bracelet that, weirdly enough, had a clean hole drilled right through it. From that hole, it was possible to hang the object as a pendant, if need be. What was weird about the hole was that it looked like it had been done with a stable fixed drill, going at high speed. This object that was meant to be 40 or 50,000 years old couldn't possibly have been made with technology like that.
There are indications of strangely out-of-place technology amongst the Denisovans, which is 20, 30,000 years earlier in the human story than it should be.
Similarly, Hancock also found long, fine needles made of bone that could have likely been used to stitch together some heavy material or make skin boats, which they might have used to navigate, which is a likely explanation for how they reached Australia. But it's not the only species we've discovered recently. In Bodo Dar, Ethiopia in the 1970s, a skull dating back to 600,000 years ago was discovered, giving humans a new direct ancestor. Called the Homo bodoensis, these species lived widely throughout Africa during the Middle Pleistocene age, and they were our direct ancestors, according to scientists. However, some paleoanthropologists have described the period during their existence as a muddle in the middle, because human evolution during this time has very little information. The discovery of the Homo bodoensis gives us more insight into this epoch, encouraging scientists to describe a majority of the humans from Africa during the Middle Pleistocene age as Homo bodoensis, and many from the southeast part of Europe as Neanderthals. These discoveries aren't just giving us new information to fill in the gaps. They're also making us rethink our assumptions about how our early ancestors migrated out of Africa. For example, in August 2021, Indonesian archaeologists discovered the remains of a teenage girl who died about 7,200 years ago. She was found buried in a limestone cave, and according to reports published in the Nature Journal, the DNA in her skull proved ancestral relations with New Guineans and Aboriginal Australians. But not only that, there were traces of an extinct species of ancient humans. This discovery was a significant one, because it changed how scientists saw the early migration patterns of humans when they first left Africa. But something even more incredible, or perhaps bizarre, depending on your outlook, has been found that stood to change our perception of human evolution. This is the mummified remains of a 6-inch human-like skeleton discovered in a ghost town in Chile's Atacama desert. When found, the speculations ran wild, and with good reason. While only 6 inches tall, the bones had some features of a 6 or 8-year-old child. Instead of the usual 12 pairs of ribs found on a human, the skeleton only had 10, not to mention the head, which had an elongated cone shape, a feature previously unheard of in any human species. So instead of considering this newfound skeleton a possible candidate for a human species, speculations turned to a different matter.
I got kind of excited a few months into the process thinking, well, what happens if it is an alien?
There are enough TV shows and documentaries crediting aliens with building civilizations and theorizing that they live among us. Even now, if you research this story, you may stumble across a 2021 documentary, Alien Mummies of Peru, which follows a crew investigating evidence that's almost 1,600 years old.
Supuestamente la entrada al sitio, estas son algunas de las partes internas, el ataúd donde se dice que estaban estas especies, porque también quiero decirles, son 2 especies, no es una la que vamos a ver hoy, son 2. Y una es mucho más extraña que lo que ustedes han visto hasta el momento.
Bajen los teléfonos.
Les hemos llamado Urpus a estos porque del quechua, perdón por la falta de ortografía, no es mía.
Celulares.
Teléfono. que dice que el urpus en quechua es modelo de un humano, humanoide, animal o personaje de ficción.
Though the documentary wasn't out at the time of the Atacama Desert investigation, it's also easy to understand how information like this can persuade people to believe that a human-like skeleton could easily be alien. In this case, however, it wasn't. Upon further study, the lead in that research and professor of microbiology and immunology at Stanford University, Gary Nolan, concluded that the Atacaman skeleton was, in fact, a female human. Nolan and his colleagues dove further into this and found that the skeleton's unique appearance was due to mutations in at least 7 genes that are known to cause either major malformations or age them quickly. Which means, though the skeleton's age looked to be at least 6 or 7 years old, the truth was that the girl had likely died a few minutes after birth due to a life-threatening mutation. In any other situation, the child would have ended up in the neonatal ICU. But given the location, a remote town in the Atacama Desert, such facilities were simply not available. The skeleton had probably been in that town for 40 years before it was discovered. And after being labeled as alien, it turned out she was a human after all, and of no other species but our very own. We are all a unique and exciting mix of individual experiences, ancestries, and environments. There is more, a lot more, to discover about where we come from and how many of us there are or used to be. But with every new discovery in this realm, there will also be a fair amount of speculation about whether or not the findings signal alien life. After all, the greenstone bracelet in Denisova that had a clean hole drilled through the middle seemed to have used a technology that didn't exist at the time, and we're still looking for answers even today. The focus, then, should be on research without assumptions or biases, because the plain truth is, there is a lot more at play than humans can fathom. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and subscribe to the Be Inspired channel for more educational and motivational content. Thanks for watching.